Hi, this week I want to share some thoughts about some historical things that may shed some light on our situation in the church today. In my own denomination, the United Methodist Church, we're preparing for a global gathering called General Conference that promises to be eventful one way or another. It's entirely likely that the United Methodist Church will split as a result of General Conference, either because of its official action or as a result to its official action or inaction. The presenting issue involved circles around the language in our Book of Discipline that we euphemistically refer to as human sexuality. That is today whether what we call self-avowed practicing homosexuals should be able to serve in an official capacity as clergy in the church, and also whether United Methodist clergy can lawfully preside at same-sex weddings. As is likely a surprise to no one at all, there's a tendency in the midst of all of this to be very excited and to say some very unkind and unchristian things to one another while we're in the middle of it. And speaking personally, I would prefer if people would refrain from doing that in the comments on this video. To make a long story short, there are many people in the denomination who believe that any significant change on our official position on human sexuality would be essentially equivalent to selling out our faith and our scripture to the culture, and then we would stand condemned as an apostate church. On the other hand, there are other people who believe that a change in our position is long overdue, that it is required by the gospel of grace to include everybody, and that anything else but a wholesale overturning of our language would be a resistance and even a denial of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, there are also many people on both sides who are simply exhausted by the never-ending fighting, that they want to let one another depart in peace, they want to wish well upon one another, they just don't want to continue to have to fight with the other side in order to be able to live their lives as they believe God has called them to live. There are other people who yearn for peace, but they don't like the idea that people who are so wrong as those on the other side should be able to leave with a blessing and, more importantly, the church property intact as they go. See my other video on United Methodist quirks to understand why that property thing is such a big deal. There are even people, again, on both sides of this particular issue, who cannot even bring themselves to wish the other side well as they depart. Because for them, it seems like that would be a denial of the gospel. You know, what do you mean that you want to wish well someone who is opposed to everything that's important? Would you wish Satan well? In the midst of this, and in my own small way to try to inject a little bit of sanity into the ongoing life of the church, I want to remind everybody that there was another time in history when there was a massive divide over an issue over which there seemed to be no room for any kind of reasonable compromise. It seems to me it's important to remember that there was a time in church history when the church sold indulgences. You have to remember that in the decades and the centuries leading up to the Protestant Reformation, the mainstream of Catholic teaching was that a person who had died does not go to be with Jesus right away, but they have their residual sins purged from them. And their time in this so-called purgatory could be lessened in exchange for various things. And one of them was the exchanging of money for what they called an indulgence. Now, we know from history that there were a lot of other issues that began to take center stage in the midst of the Reformation, but it's important to remember that Luther's 95 Theses that he nailed to the church in Wittenberg were about indulgences. Now, I'm a Protestant, and so my sympathies, reasonably so, are with the Protestants in this particular case. Because it's easy for someone like me to say that the Catholic Church at the time was not just getting something wrong, because, you know, we all get stuff wrong. It was that they were getting something that was so wrong, that was so core to the gospel. Now, my point in this video is not to try to shame either side. I'm not going to try to shame the Protestants and say, you really should have stayed and worked for change from the inside, although Martin Luther tried to do that and it almost got him killed. And I'm also not going to shame the Catholics for maintaining a belief that seems like it could very well be heresy. What I want to draw attention to is that today there is no branch of the church of which I am aware that is still in the business of selling indulgences. Now, it is the case that the Catholic Church is going to have a lot more language about purgatory and all the rest than many Protestants are going to feel comfortable with, but the point is that the actual selling of indulgences has been illegal in the Catholic Church since 1567. Now, this change of doctrine didn't overnight cause a reunification of the church. As we know, the division between Catholic and Protestant still exists to this day. But what it does show is that God can still be at work in a church, even if they get something so wrong as even thinking there could be remission of sins for something as simple and as easy as just writing a check. One thing that's very hard to deny, although I'm sure there are people out there who would like to deny it, is that God has still been at work in the Catholic Church. They may not get everything right all the time. They may have gotten rid of some of the objectionable doctrines, but they haven't gotten rid of all of them. And yet, I don't think that we can say that the issue of purgatory in general and the specific issue of the selling of indulgences, they somehow cut themselves off for the ongoing love and engagement of God with them. So in our world today, whether you're caught up in the debate in the United Methodist Church or whatever conflict you find yourself in, remember that the God who continued to love Peter even when he denied Jesus, who continued to love Judas even when he betrayed Jesus, who continued to love the church throughout all of its ups and downs, even going so far as exchanging indulgences for money, will continue to work through us broken people and churches too, even if we end up on the wrong side of any particular debate. And so whatever you do, continue to pray for the people, both the people who agree with you on whatever topic we're talking about, and even the ones who don't. You never know what God will do down the line. Well, that's all I have for this week. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to take up, please send me an email at pastorstevic@gmail.com. If you found these videos to be interesting or encouraging or engaging in some way, please consider liking and sharing them on the various social media platforms. If you'd like to subscribe to the YouTube channel where these are posted, it's youtube.com/tstevic1. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.